Hey there, I'm Chris Marion, and you're listening to the Queen Bee Sessions, conversations with Wisconsin women in conservation. We are here to tell stories about all the good work being done to protect soil, water, and wildlife by Wisconsin's women farmers, landowners, and conservationists. We hope these stories might inspire, instruct, and encourage you in your own efforts to nurture the land and yourself. Today, it is my great pleasure to be talking to Marci Hess, my own neighbor in rural Lafayette County. Down here in Southwest Wisconsin, Marci is well known for her devotion to prairies and prairie critters of all scales and stripes. She also slings a mean chainsaw. Welcome to the Queen Bee Sessions, Marci.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so great to be here with you. We are on a lot of Zooms together, but this is special because it's all about you. And I'm so excited to stretch out and explore your history with prairies. Marci is a former marketing professional who worked with Main Street organizations, but now she and her husband, Jim, stored 30 acres of restored prairies, 8 acres of remnant prairies. We're going to come back to that and talk about what that is. 10 acres of remnant savanna, and 5 acres of woods, which they've cleared of invasive species, which if you have done anything with prairies yourself, you know that's a heavy, heavy lift. All of these sections have names, and we are going to let Marci tell us about them. Marci, what's your conservation origin story? How did you end up becoming a rural land steward? Did you always have a passion for these sort of things?
I did. I grew up in Kansas, and it's well known for its prairies. Spent many years driving through the Flint Hills, and I used to envision these hay meadows with the great big round bales as prairies and bison, and thinking this must be what it used to look like. So yeah, prairies have been in my blood for all my life. I didn't have much time to deal with it until we moved to Wisconsin in 2000.
So how did you get started? I mean, this is a big deal, what you have going on your place. It's a lot. It's a true passion. And was there a moment or a view or what happened to energize you and captivate you?
Well, Jim and I had been exploring how do we get involved in prairies when we're up here after moving to Wisconsin, since this is what we really wanted to do and we had time. Madison Audubon was having a Prairies Jubilee, and they don't have this anymore, but we thought, let's go. We attended, we did walks through prairies. They were identifying different plants and talking about the birds and the insects and the wildlife. And I looked at Jim and I said, I want to do this. This is what I want to do. And of course, we both had always wanted to live in a rural area, but his job had prevented that from happening because of his contracts. So as soon as we had the opportunity, we found the perfect spot and moved here.
Well, that's amazing. So is this what I'm hearing? You used to, for fun, go on walks. If you were with the Audubon Society, were you bird watching, or what made you even want to go on these walks? It sounds like you caught the bug from exploring in a recreational sense.
Well, Madison Audubon has a place called Goose Pond in Columbia County, which is about 40 miles-ish north of Madison. And in between September and November, they would have seed collecting on weekends. Yeah, we thought, let's go do it. And so we spent our weekends, 8 hours on a Saturday, generally collecting seed, learning all the plants backwards. We had no idea what the color of the blooms were. And here we were collecting the seeds.
That's a really cool story. And you still are out there collecting seeds.
I'm still out there every year.
Can you explain your property to listeners? What is your place like? I've been there, but I don't really have a sense of the whole scope. What does it look like to you?
Our place is rolling. We have hills and ravines. I don't call them valleys because it's not big enough. But we have everything from very dry, rocky, sandy soil all the way down to wet mesic to dense-ish oak, hickory woods, and then that continuum between the prairie and woods, which is the oak savanna.
So you and I both live in the Driftless region in rural Lafayette County, Southwest Wisconsin, and the Driftless region is known for those rolling hills and bottoms that have little creeks, and generally our landforms were created by water. So you, though, have a little bit different perspective on the Driftless because you talk a lot about the savanna. Can you tell us about what your view of where we sit in the landscape of the nation and the world?
Yes, the Driftless area should be designated the eighth wonder of the world because it is truly uniquely created. There's no other place like it. You know, you can talk about the Africa savannas, but they're not the oak hickory savannas or oak savannas as we tend to call them here. And when you're driving around and you see a little pocket that it's generally fairly overgrown, but you'll see the bur oaks or the white oaks, and you know that's a remnant oak savanna. And it's like, I mean, they're everywhere here.
When you drive with Marci, it's a little bit different than when you drive around with other people. What's your favorite part of your property? Do you have a favorite part?
I don't. I think the favorite part comes from each discovery each year. Every growing season, we have a new theme, and it just kind of happens organically. And each year, we've also been lucky enough, fortunate enough, to keep discovering new plants. So if a new plant pops up somewhere, that might just be my favorite section.
Yes, that makes sense. So is taking care of your acreage that you have restored or are restoring? I mean, when I hear you talk every year, often you're starting something new or you're going back into a place that needs to be cleared out again. Is it a lot of work?
The way we do it, it's a lot of work. We call it the Hess way. Let's do this the Hess way. But it's because we're trying to protect the plants that are underneath this degraded areas that we are working to restore, and we're also trying to be gentle and light. We have grassland birds here, we have other kind of nesting birds, and we have insects that we adore. So, but it is our passion, and it is what we do now, full time, so to speak. So a person doesn't have to go at it the way we do, and clearly it makes a difference is how much land you're working. So if you chunk it out, it changes your time frames.
How did you learn to do this? I mean, you talked about taking walks and collecting seeds. That's not very technical, to stewarding all this acreage in a very, well, in the weeds is what I want to say, but a very detailed way. How did you learn all this stuff?
Well, you start by hanging out with people, hanging out with people who know these things. Walks are really wonderful because when you're on a walk, if it's a group-led thing, like Madison Audubon, for example, when they did the tours up through Goose Pond, you're with people who do this. And then I read. I'm an avid reader. So I have over 500 books in my library that I consider reference books. And then that's never good enough. I have to do deep dives into certain things. So Google Scholar has become my friend. And so I read research papers, and then I try to compile pieces of information. If I want to do a deep dive on something I'm trying to figure out how to manage better, manage more efficiently and effectively, because I like to do it right the first time and not keep doing it over and over. So I'll do a deep dive into that and then try to write it up so that it makes sense. And then that helps me.
So, is it expensive?
Can be. Can be. It again depends on what are your goals. What do you hope to achieve? You know, first of all, you have to have a land, which isn't particularly cheap. And then if you don't have the support of a group like NRCS, then you are forking out everything to make this happen. Or if you don't like again, was back to Madison Audubon, all of the years of seed collecting with them, and then they, for our first planting, gave us the seed that we needed for that in exchange for all those years. So, we would do trade outs with other people as well.
So you mentioned NRCS being a resource for you. What is NRCS and how have you worked with NRCS?
NRCS was a National Conservation Resource Service.
I shouldn't have made you define that. I actually work for NRCS, right? So Natural Resources Conservation Service, which is a branch of USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture. But in your context, what has NRCS done for you and with you?
What they do is it's cost share. We did a 12-acre planting. And we had to do certain amount of work, which then they quantified financially, and then they would give us up to a certain amount of seed, and then we wanted much more diverse planting than what their expectations were. So I think they were looking at 30 some odd species, and we ended up with about 90. So we did a lot of our own collecting, but it's the cost share that is so beneficial.
So you have had great experiences with NRCS, but you have also worked with a lot of other groups and agencies. I mean, I've heard you mention Trout Unlimited. I've heard you mention Prairie Enthusiasts. You mentioned the Audubon Society. What other groups have you leaned on? Pheasants Forever. I think you worked with Pheasants Forever on some of your place. What other groups do you find helpful? Would you recommend to other people?
What I find most helpful isn't so much a group as it is Facebook. There are some really, really good Facebook groups out there. Restoring Minnesota is interesting that it's a Minnesota, because I've met a lot of these folks through Wisconsin conferences and gatherings, even in Ohio. But if you can ask questions, you'll get a wide range of answers. You'll get some good stuff and some dogma, and you'll get a little bit of arguments, a few arguments, because there's 50 ways to write, and everyone thinks their way is the right way.
Well, I've seen some of your arguments on Facebook, and they tend to be around prairie burning. Can you tell me about your perspective on burns?
My perspective on burning is you burn when you need to, and that is generally to remove the thatch. A lot of the reasons why these other burns are not quite scientifically accurate for the reasoning of it. But the other piece of burning is you have to leave refugia. You shouldn't ever burn 100%, because your insects have no place to repopulate from if you do that. I'm not against burning. I'm just against this burning that they, by the calendar year, because nature doesn't work on the calendar year. Mm-hmm. I'm totally against burning without leaving refugia, and I'm against burning as the only management tool, because the more management techniques you use, the more diversity you'll have.
Well, by the time this podcast is posted, this will have already happened, and it will be available. Your presentation will be available at the WeWic blog at wiwic.org. But you're going to be teaching presenting on establishing prairie
Yeah.
for Wisconsin Women in Conservation. I'm really excited about that. I know that people are going to have a lot of questions for you about other management tools, because prairie burns are kind of the famous thing, right? You certain time of year, you see the plumes of smoke. It's very exciting. And it's kind of fun. I mean, you helped me establish a prairie, and I've done some burning here. What other management tools are there besides burns?
Mowing. Mowing is a huge management tool that is overlooked. And I think because there's not a lot of sexiness to it. And what you say about the burns is one of the reasons that they are popular. Plus, there are groups out there who, in the 70s, burns were stopped. They were prohibited. And once people were able to start burning again, there's that great fear that it'll be prohibited again. So they promote.
Mm.
But yeah, and there's so many, sadly, I know people don't like to use herbicide, but I don't know how you can get rid of some of these invasives without it. You can't burn away your resprouting woodies. You can't mow them away. You have to cut and treat.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you'll be fielding a lot of questions about that. I know that there's already like 110 people signed up, so expect a lot of interaction. You're going to do awesome. So you have a huge reputation in our neighborhood for helping people get started with prairie, but you also are known as the Herps Lady. You are the prairie lady and the Herps lady. And I think you're probably in this.
Reptiles is what she means.
You're the biggest advocate for the bugs and the snakes and the turtles and the birds and all of these creatures that inhabit these special habitats that we're trying to create. And I really don't know anybody who highlights the critters on their place as much as you do. Where did this all start?
What is the purpose of a prairie? What is the purpose of a native ecosystem? And if it's not to give habitat and host plants to the wildlife, the insects, the critters that use them, then it becomes, it's all about the plants, and it's really not. It's about the ecosystem and the habitat. And having a field of plants is not really an ecosystem. It's a field of plants. But if that ecosystem, then it becomes real when you end with the insects that feed on each other, that the birds feed on, if they're young, the reptiles feed on, the small mammals, the big ones, the list goes on and on. Then you have literally a feeding guild. And that's what it's all about. You're feeding your critters, and you're giving them a place to rear their young. The insects cannot evolve fast enough to use invasive plants as their host plants. Mm-hmm. And some of them, this is another issue with the burning, if you don't leave refugia, some of these insects are specialists, which makes them even more prone to being killed. Done away with.
So you mentioned the word refugia. I imagine that's just a spot for animals to take refuge when a burn is happening?
That is a spot that is not burned during the burn. It is planned, it is intentional, it is like habitat. So if you're burning a dry area, you leave part of your dry area. If you're burning a gradation of dry to moist, you would leave a dry to moist area. Otherwise, the insects can't come back. And the other important part of the refuge is it's also about the types of plants. If your gradation has the same amount and types of plants, I should say, as your refugia, then it's a good deal. But if you're burning an area that's just really beautiful, and this area you're leaving is very degraded, then you're just burning off those insects. There's still no place to repopulate from because they were in the good area. It's complicated.
It is very complicated. And what I like about your take on prairies is that you have an eye to the whole system. Um, and you also really dig those bugs. I mean,
Well, we wouldn't be here without them. We'd be neck deep in a bunch of carrion and poo.
that is true.
We
So
wouldn't have any food. I mean, what part of your life could you live without insects if you think about it?
it's true. Well, Marci, you and I are part of a group called the Soil Sisters in this region, a bunch of women who own land or farm, and we get together for potlucks and we have a big listserv. And if anyone wants to identify a bug, they always, a bug or a moth or a snake or a turtle, they always reach out to you because you, I guess if you don't know it, you've got 500 reference books and you can find.
I can usually get close, but there's a bunch of them that even the experts can't identify even past a family.
Well, actually, haven't you identified some things that have not been identified before in this region?
In this region on Bug Guide, yeah, I haven't found anything that is solely unique that like the Wisconsin insect research collection doesn't have. But I'm working on it.
But you're finding the cool stuff that's coming back here, and that's
nothing in Lafayette County as far as insects go have been documented. And then I say that I'll take it back. There is one family of beetles that was studied here.
Mm-hmm.
So every bug that I am dealing with and I'm vouching and I'm photographing, it all goes up to the research collection. And I literally am putting Lafayette County on the map.
That's pretty cool. So Lafayette County is pretty special in terms of grassland birds, is it not? I mean, we already have quite a bit of habitat for birds.
Yeah. It's a nice place for grassland birds.
And you have some pretty amazing things going on with birds on your farm right now.
Yeah, we do. We have we have kestrel boxes. That's a recent thing, and so we've had they come out and they ban them. We have spread these boxes out because they have to be, or the kestrels would nest. So we have 10 boxes over our neighborhood, and in one of the boxes we have screech owls and 4 screech owl babies, and they're just like the cutest little things.
It's amazing. It's amazing. You should follow Marci on Facebook because you'll get to see pictures of these adventures that she has on her place. It's quite wonderful. So let's talk about chainsaws. We we talked a little bit about management of prairies, but it isn't just the prairies that need managing. And you have gone to school and become certified in chainsaws, using chainsaws, correct?
Yep, I have a level 2 certification for chainsaw use and about 8 years under my belt.
And so what are you using chainsaws for on your place?
Our oak savanna, our woods, and even our remnant prairie is highly degraded. And around the edges are very, very degraded, meaning there's honeysuckles, autumn olives, multiflora roses, overwhelming mulberries and box elders in there too. So they have to be removed. And that's and then there's always storm damage.
Right. So you have mentioned degraded a couple times. Can you explain what that means in terms of prairies?
Yeah. How do I explain it? Other than not healthy, but degraded tends to mean full of invasives, full of non-native plants.
Okay. And we want to get rid of them because the bugs do not thrive on the invasives. They thrive on the natives, and invasives can crowd natives out.
Yep, the invasives outcompete the natives. The bugs, the insects have not adapted to using the non-natives to rear their young. I mean, if you see a leaf mine, that is a very specific insect that uses that leaf. And without that plant, that insect can't they will just go extinct.
Hmm.
So every time you have an area that's full of invasives, you just have to realize that could be a great habitat.
So how do invasives come in? Why do we have invasives?
Sadly, we have invasives because some of our government programs have put them in. They brought in multiflora rose. I don't know why the research wasn't done better. Multiflora rose was supposed to be a living fence. Reed canary grass was supposed to hold the soil on stream banks, but its roots are too short, although it grows really fast and really good. But its roots are too short. It doesn't do anything to prevent erosion. And then, you just have these things that people have brought in from over time, maybe from put in their gardens from a nursery, and they escape, and then they hybridize, and then the birds share them around with us as they sit in the tree.
Yeah, yeah.
Gifts from the birds.
So can you talk a bit about what remnants are? You are working on some prairie remnants and some woodland remnants. Is that right?
Yep. And oak savanna remnants.
So what are those? What does that mean?
Well, bottom line, the simplest is a remnant is an area that has never been plowed. It's remnant soil. It's soil that you would think of as being here when the earth was created. It's never ever been tampered with. And there tends to be certain plants that grow on remnants. I don't find that all that helpful, because depending on what remnant it is and where it's at, what it's doing. If you find some native plants on an area you know has never been cropped, it's a remnant. Even if it's been grazed, it can be grazed. But as long as it's not been tilled up and plowed under, it is a remnant remnant soil.
Wow. And so why are these things valuable?
They tend to have very unique plants that it's difficult to establish if you are planting and restoring an area from a cropped field, or even trying to restore it yourself from a remnant that needs additional species put in it. We call them high conservation plants. Every plant has a number, a ranking from 0 to 10 based on its rarity, 10 being the highest. And so these places tend to have 7 and aboves.
So special things that you can't see elsewhere.
Yeah, and it's hard to establish elsewhere. You can get them established. It's just much more difficult.
Oh, okay. So they're established and they're thriving, and they might pop up in other places, but this is a place where they can reproduce. And
I will propagate them to keep. One of the things we like to do here is to keep expanding our diversity, and so I will propagate these and try to introduce them into other areas. I've had some luck on it, and others not so much.
okay. So why is diversity important? You mentioned that when you worked with NRCS to do your 12 acres of prairie, you expanded their seed list to include other things. I know that when I did my pollinator project with NRCS, you recommended adding some more things to it, which I did. Why do we want diversity? What is important about that?
Your insects, for one. The more plants, the more opportunity you have for more insects, or even insects. But anytime you have diversity, it's going to be more resilient. You have less opportunity when drought hits, or you might have a level of erosion at some point somewhere. You've still got species over here doing their thing, doing the work. It's like you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So it's just that same concept.
Yeah, yeah. So what advice do you have to women in particular who want to start out in prairie habitat or prairie stewardship? Um, is it a field that a lot of women are involved with?
I see it growing, but it hasn't been in the past a field that many women are in. Um, I'm not sure why. I don't know. I guess because sometimes the clearing, maybe it's the chainsaw work. Typically you wouldn't find a woman doing that. Maybe it's the mowing. Maybe it's they're not that interested in the burning, or I really don't have any idea. But I am happy to see that there are more and more women getting into this avocation or vocation.
Obsession, passion.
Obsession. Yeah. I think if I had some advice to give somebody interested in doing this, think about your goals. What is it you really, really, really want? And how much time do you want to spend on it? Because you can chunk it out. You don't have to buy however many acres of land and do everything all at once. You can do this here, you could do this there, but get your goals straight.
Well, that's interesting because that is the beginning of a conservation plan. So one of the things that Wisconsin Women in Conservation can offer people is a free conservation plan, which doesn't sound like much, but when you go through the process with a professional, somebody from NRCS or Pheasants Forever, you have a conservation professional asking you to define your goals for your property. And I think you've said that over and over again. What are your goals? What do you want? What do you want to see? And I think that's such valuable advice, is to sit and think about your goals, do research about your goals, buy 500 books and start to know. But I think you really, you probably like to dig in to the details more than most people.
Yeah, I do.
And you have a terrific blog where you offer a lot of the work you've done to other people. It's called driftlessprairies.org. So just no spaces, no dashes, driftlessprairies.org. It's incredibly, incredibly useful, educational, inspirational. Your motto, I think, is native habitat restoration is an art and a science.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about that motto.
Well, it is an art and a science. It's an art because it's a fairly young discipline.
Uh-huh.
And you're dealing with nature. So we don't know. We just literally do not know. And I think, okay, for one thing, we have problems with cool season grasses. Mm-hmm. And I listen to, people tell me, here's this, here, do this, do that, do this, do that. Nothing was quite working. And I thought, I'm tired of listening to these people. So I'm going to go find it out on my own. There has to be, everything I deal with, there has to be a biological reason. And typically it's an invasive that I'm dealing with. And I want to understand how it grows. And that way I can know how to do the minimal amount of maintenance, the minimal amount of disturbance to get the maximum effect. And what tool do I use? Do I use herbicide? Do I get out my parsnip predator? Do I go out and sever that root? Do I mow it at a certain time? Maybe I have to burn that area to, and stimulate it and then deal with it.
Well, you're making a really compelling case for people to visit that blog because it's all on there. And I know from knowing you for almost 20 years that you really dig in to an issue and you don't let it go. You have a lot of quite technical research on the blog, and it seems like you've done research with various entities. You're doing research right now, aren't you, on the kestrels? You're banning them and you're working with someone. I think you've done some stuff with turtles. What are some of the other projects you've helped with, and what partners have you worked with research wise?
Well, we do a lot of citizen scientist work, and one group came out and did some soil testing. I haven't seen the results of that, but that was a group out of Montana, and they wanted to see how an older prairie did soil makeup and how it changed versus a new prairie. So I kept expecting a newly established prairie, I should say. I kept expecting them to come back out. So I don't know how that worked out. Then we work with bluebirds. We have a bluebird trail that we do citizen science work with that. Most of my work has been vouchering plants, vouchering insects, and photographing insects, which then all end up at UW.
Okay.
Either the herbarium or the insect research collection.
So can you tell us about moths and how you capture photographs of them?
Yeah, this was fun. although you have to stay up late. We have two different ways of doing that. We'll set up a sheet and a black light on our garage door. And then the blue light, or one of those black. Well, I guess it's a blue light, but it's a black light. If you know what I'm saying.
So it's like what we used to have at parties, and you wear white, and then you kind of glow.
Yes,
and you can get these at Home Depot, right? It's called a black light. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And we also have a generator where we set up a mercury vapor, and we'll usually do that in the woods or the Oak Savannah, somewhere out because the house has electricity. So we'll go somewhere rather remote and do that. And he set up a sheet, but that's the easy part. The hard part is learning how to photograph them, getting your lighting right, getting the right camera with the right lens, and holding it properly, and then you have to figure out, well, what parts do I need to photograph? I used to love photographing their faces, but other than a personal desire to see their face, that's not very helpful for ID. Moths usually have an underwing. They'll have as they spread their wings out, you'll see something on maybe colors or patterns on their underwing in some of them. And so you have to know to photograph that, or you might not get a very good ID.
Wow. Well, I have really enjoyed your photographs, and it's just miraculous. I mean, what kid doesn't remember seeing something crazy on their screen door at night under the porch light? But I mean, you're basically replicating that experience in a very scientific manner, and it's really cool. You have some really cool things. What are you doing with the banding? What are the kestrels? What are you what are they trying to track with that?
Well, here's some interesting stuff. Kestrels are not supposed to come back to the same nest spots. And this year, two of our boxes have kestrels that have returned.
Wow.
So, we're making history here in Lafayette County, and I love it.
You're shaking it up, shaking up the kestrel science. My gosh.
Our boxes have been so productive that the Madison Audubon, in partnership with the American Kestrel Partnership, are the ones who do this banding and where we report these numbers to. 3 years ago, they were so impressed with our occupancy rates. I mean, we have high occupancy rates, so we are churning these babies out. And they came down to find out, well, what's different about where these locations are or what's going on. And then they decided we had to come down and band them. And so last year was the first year they banded, and this year is the second. And then we still have the chicks. We haven't got chicks yet, but when we get them, we'll be banding them.
Wow, you have a bird bed and breakfast on your plate.
We do.
They have a buffet all day long in the prairie, so that's probably why they want to come.
And they help us with some of that rodent control.
Yeah, you've done some work with the bats in nearby Yellowstone Lake State Park too, I think. What was that project?
Yeah, counting. We're there counting the bats. We've helped them put up bat boxes and renew bat boxes, restore them because they've been degraded for some reason or another, or just over time. We've done the echolocation. But it is so cool. You get the little sound machine, and then you can hear them. You can hear the way the bats sound. Otherwise, we'd never be able to hear it without this device.
So you're picking up the actual sound that the bats are sending out to find the bugs.
Right.
Wow, my grandson would love that. He's very into echolocation.
But there's counts 2 times a year that we do. One, what they call pre-volancy, and post-volancy, which means pre-babies and post-babies. And fortunately, with white nose syndrome, we are coming back. I'll also help them tag bats at Yellowstone a couple times. That's fun. That's another late night activity, but you get to see the bats up close and personal, and you get to see how they collect this data. It's awesome.
That is really amazing. Well, you not only spend a lot of time on your own place. I mean, I know that you too just work tirelessly on your property, but you also do a lot of work on other people's places with Trout Unlimited and other groups.
Yeah.
What do you get out of this work? What is, how can you describe what's so satisfying about doing this work?
Restoring the habitat, seeing that you are giving a place for the wildlife, which includes insects, to exist, to thrive, and to reproduce in a time when they don't have that. We are in the Anthropocene, the 6th extinction, and we're seeing it. So this gives them one more spot to be.
So it's a big deal living in the Anthropocene in the time of climate challenges that we're in. What would you tell someone who feels overwhelmed about that? How little of a place can you work on and still have an impact?
Oh man, front lawn, whatever the size of your front lawn is, or backyard, you pick, postage stamp. Anything you do to give the natives a place to exist and reproduce is helpful. But it is hard. I mean, I live with the grief daily. It is very, very difficult. But the good thing is, when I'm out there and I'm working away and I'm doing quiet work, like cut and treat, for example, and I hear my brown thrasher singing to me. I hear the wood thrush singing to me. I see the little critters moving around in the plants, and then I think, life's okay, and it's all okay. I'm doing what I can do.
Yeah.
I'm hoping I can help others do it.
Well, that's a really healing message, I think, in a time that can be full of grief, like you said. Our motto at Wisconsin Women in Conservation is nurturing land and ourselves. And I think there's a balance between just killing yourself, burning yourself out, trying to address these very, very, very big, intractable problems. But then there's brown thrashers. And I think you give us a really good reminder to not get so busy in doing the good that we can't hear the birds and smell the native flowers.
Do whatever it takes to refresh yourself. Yesterday morning I went out and vouchered all the sedges in my oak savanna that we're restoring, because it's amazing. I mean, we were told by quote unquote experts that this land was not worth restoring and there would be no good come from it. And yet the sedges are prevalent. And so I vouchered 13 of them, took photos, and that was my joy for the day, so to speak.
That's really amazing. Well, I think you know that on my property, we had what was called a degraded wetland. That's what
Yeah.
the soil conservationists who took a walk around with us early on called it. And they didn't really think it was worth anything either, but we put sheep and goats on there, and now it's turning back to native sedge. We didn't plant any of those. And sedges are fascinating to me. They're so beautiful. They're so diverse just in their foliage, but then they've got these weird asteroid flowers, and they're a lot of fun. When you say you're vouchering sedges, what is vouchering?
I will collect them, press them, and that then they go up to the herbarium to be forever in perpetuity.
Well,
while you mention that, I don't think about it. It doesn't come off the top of my head. But yes, using animals and grazing is another management technique. And it doesn't come to my forefront because I don't have animals. But it is another technique that can be used. So
well, you and Jim are the animals.
we are the animals. And
You're
our
the
mower.
animals on your place.
Our mower will simulate grazing, yes.
Some of us are lazy. We don't do it the Hess way. And we get goats and sheep to do it for us. And we're just not up to the task, Marci. Well, this has been
or you're smarter.
Well, I don't
Working smarter.
Well, I think there is room for everybody in this work, right? And all of our different gifts can be applied to this project of healing the earth and providing habitat for creatures. I just really appreciate what you bring to this neighborhood and to the statewide and national conversation when it comes to restoration. You really do your homework, and I can't thank you enough for sharing your time with us today, but also sharing everything you share on the blog. It's really something.
Thank you. I love it. I love doing that. I thank you for having me today.
Well, I really look forward to the presentation, and you are one of our conservation summer camp experts for this year, and all of that ends up on our blog. So if you want to see Marci Hess live on the Zoom with 100 some other people asking her questions in a rapid fire chat, please check that out at the wewick.org blog. And this podcast will live on there too. So Marci, thank you for all the things you have recorded for perpetuity in so many ways. You are building and have already left such a tremendous legacy. And I appreciate you.
Thank you.